August 17th, 2024. 3 days passed and Costello spent 2 of them without Avery. Last night, she traded her shift to administer his second microdose of mushrooms. She made a promise to focus on his conditioning as well, so she felt contractually obligated to take the day off. He was focused. Thursday, he got some FaceTime in with Mom and informed her on his tour to Maine. It was also the first time he ever told her about his prosperity, thanks to grants. He didn't forecast anything morbid, but let her know his assets were much more than he truly knew what to do with. Candace was the least bit interested in the digital currency. She was beaming with the nostalgia she drew from Costello's final destination. When he first started cycling as a teen, he would come home full of adrenaline and tell her he felt like he could cycle the entire state of New Hampshire. She knew his map would send him through New Hampshire before landing in Maine. Candace always pressed Costello on his chirping about cycling across New Hampshire as an odd claim since they now lived in Southern California. His argument was all the traveling they did on the East Coast, he was much more familiar with that state versus California. Plus, he still felt like a lost gelding in the big, fast, scary pace of sunny California. He was really just a kid who was excited and blurted out the first cogent thought that came to mind when he was full of adrenaline. Costello was in a vibrant zeitgeist, evolving from Aaron Eldridge, East Coast wallflower, to Costello of California, the cycling horse track enthusiast. Candace brought up his cardiac issues briefly. He convinced her with the new medicines and training it was safe, ensured her he would set aside any record-setting times and just focus on completing the task. Costello was beaming himself watching his mom sit aboard a ship cruising a Norwegian fjord. Even after coming up flush with cash after the Hawaiian bar fiasco, he knew his mother worked harder than anyone, and he had that adult-child sense of pride in her. Avery could see the pride he had as he told her about his talk with Candace. However, she remained focused and pressed him for more details on his planning. Costello made some changes to Avery's mapping. There was the moment he implied he wouldn't adjust her itinerary, but he encountered a little piece of history that got him thinking, so he did some slight manicuring. He decided to cut across the northwest corner of Arkansas rather than cycling up through Tulsa to get to Missouri. It was a bit more rural, but knocked some miles off. Then he chose to head north out of Blue Ridge and cycle through Pennsylvania. From there, targeting Albany, to get across the Hudson and ride into the southwest tip of New Hampshire. Avery's map was great. He just got that reminder from Mom about his teen self wanting to cycle across all of New Hampshire, so that would be the plan. Finish the journey the way it was always intended, and then enjoy the last 30 miles into Old Orchard Beach in Maine. Avery applauded the changes. Considering he would be the maniac out there pushing the pedals, she wasn't about to demand he stick with her plan. She had heard the quickest way between 2 points is as the crow flies. However, us wingless species down here have terrain and infrastructure to navigate. She was just trying to keep Costello on the safest and most civilized path possible. Costello poked at her, sweetly, about how she's observing his mapping quite delicately, while feeding him plant medicine that could introduce him to Satan or God. She got a real good laugh at this, considering the tiny doses he was taking. He gave her a look of uncertainty. His second taste of psilocybin was curious, almost as though he didn't catch that pungent, earthy sapidity Tuesday night. It frightened him as he drank it down. Some of it refused to go down, causing him to retch. The mushrooms didn't seem to want to join him in with each attempt to swallow or flush them down with water. He got to taste them even more. Avery was fascinated with his description of this experience. The taste becoming smell, the smell becoming touch, the touch becoming sound, all these sensory interactions giving him a virtual presentation of the life that comes from the ground. The millions of connections through root systems, all the energy and dialogue, almost like an organic internet. Avery sat and listened with amazement. She thought, Another small dose gave him all this sensory overload? Costello threw ice on that when he said that was just his description of the taste. He didn't feel shit after that. Avery quickly overcame the moment of concern that maybe she shouldn't be feeding this guy any more psilocybin, and like a 20-year minor leaguer with the patience of a gnat, she told him to figure out how to drink that shit down without throwing up. Costello was on day 5 without the risperidone and feeling good. Figured it would be worth it if he was going to experience this visceral journey through the Earth's crust a few days a week. He'd never seen these vestiges of a spiritual esoterica about the Earth within himself. It lifted his interests in how a larger dose may affect him. Avery moved on to his conditioning. His new diet was fantastic. A nice balance of protein and carbs with a much higher caloric intake. Gallons of water and increasing his sodium intake just enough to prepare himself for much more sodium replacement while cycling. Costello was rushing through the details because he really wanted to talk more about this sense of spirituality he was feeling. Suddenly, the tour felt like it had more purpose. More purpose than just being a goal or a bucket list bullet point. He couldn't put his finger on it, so he kept bringing it up in hopes Avery would have some thoughts. She didn't. He knew she was in between focusing on the logistics and conditioning, all while managing her own life at work. He wasn't upset. It wasn't her responsibility to be in sync with everything he was feeling. However, he kept on about it with perseverance. Costello internalized his adversity. He wasn't much of a superhero enthusiast growing up, but he felt an energy inside him that kept him focusing on forward progress, even without the help of others. There was one toast he became fond of and instantly retained it and could speak it verbatim. Here's to dreams of crippled soldiers crossing the bridge to Valhalla before the Firebird catches their scent. We're all being chased by death one way or another. Some of us are fortunate enough to have no nuances associated to our predictable demise, such as health issues, unpaid debts to the mob, maybe a unique scent that attracts mountain lions. You know, basic stuff. The real story is how we handle the adversity or accept the assurance of death one way or another. Sure, we can up our observation game, keep our senses on high alert and push the anxiety through the ceiling. There are those who have the ability to waltz through life with acute foresight, calmly batting down anxiety at every turn, while sadly, so many others fight like hungry ravens for safety, frantically tossing every instinctual weapon around in chaos. In many cases, they wind up exhausted and coiled with debilitating anxiety and depression. In our interconnected consciousness, we have the adjunct faculties to support those who struggle, while also the sense to ask those who handle adversity how it is they fucking do it. We may never be as skilled as they are, but it doesn't mean we can't up our game. At that moment, Costello decided he would dedicate his tour to those suffering from mental illnesses who don't have the support systems they need to show them they are loved and validated. The slice of the world that deserved to be recognized rather than ostracized. He asked Avery if she would help him find organizations supporting people with mental illnesses, so he could network with them and share their missions. She appeared unsure with the request. It made her feel like he wasn't pleased with her progress regarding conditioning, nutrition, and medicine. Costello saw the look and reassured her he was very comfortable with her path. So much so, he pledged to maintain the routines she started him on, including the substitute for the risperidone. He wanted her to know he felt as though his consciousness was slightly expanding in a healthy manner since starting these small doses of psilocybin. Avery wanted to help with the added plan of networking with organizations to help amplify their work through his cycling. Costello really believed it wouldn't take more than a state or two before media outlets would be reporting on his tour, especially if he was pushing the pedals not only for himself, but also in support of compatriots dealing with mental illnesses. He had been discouraged by the empty promises made in Congress to tackle these challenges, always stuck in their tracks because of bureaucracy and rank partisanship. He knew the loudest voices for the people were always the people themselves.